This podcast is part of E2C Network, where we share the whole Auburn experience.
Warrior Auburn fans, welcome to No Huddle, your source for Auburn football news and discussion, part of the E2C Network. I'm AJ Richardson. I'm also here with Jared Davis. We're going to be talking about the Bulldogs, the Mississippi State Bulldogs from Stark Vegas, I guess. You know, the ones that have maroon and not the red. I feel like I see the red ones all around, and they just bark at me. Even I had one today. I'm not even joking. Like a Georgia fan bark at me, and you're like, shut up, dude. Like, just shut up. Like, it's not. Stop. Like, I'm over you. Thank goodness Mississippi State doesn't do that. But, you know, they got the little clang of bell things. Which,
yeah,
okay,
I don't know.
Let's take a moment. Let's take a moment. If you've ever been around Mississippi State fans, they love their bells, and they're gonna they're gonna tell you about it. And you're like, how did you convince the SEC that you can bring in an artificial noisemaker and ring it throughout the play? I don't understand. Like, I don't understand. Like, we just have little shakers that go, and you're like, that doesn't help anything. Like, we're yelling, we're using our voices. Like every other college football team, and somehow you're the one that gets the exception. Anyway, moment over.
Tell me how you feel about it, AJ. I feel like you're holding back a little bit.
The reason I'm holding back is I have brain damage from going to a Mississippi State game, and literally a fan behind me is ringing their freaking bell right in my ear. Okay, that's my real feelings, and I've definitely lost brain.
And how can the people stay in touch with you, AJ? And that's all we got for this session, guys. We're out.
Yeah. So you can know my disdain for Mississippi State. I mean, I don't hate them, but like, it's not the best. And you know, when I was back in college, Mississippi State, we competed decently with them, but historically we've been able to just beat Mississippi State whenever and wherever. And up until I think it was Dak Prescott, Mississippi State wasn't even on the radar. They were kind of like a step above Vandy. Like, they weren't much better than them. And we're like, yeah, it's pretty much an automatic win. And now look, Mississippi State, the last few years has kind of put up a good fight against Auburn and even other teams. So, couple kind of big storylines to be looking out for. It looks like Will Rogers, he didn't play last week. I don't know if he'll be up for this. We're recording this on Sunday. I haven't heard any news. He may be playing. If he plays, that's a difference maker because he was right under Mike Leach, and Leach got Will Rogers into a really good quarterback, honestly. So it's going to be kind of different if he doesn't play. But if he doesn't play, favors Auburn big time. I mean, if you look at last week, Mississippi State, they only put up 7 points the whole game. Like, if you're an Auburn fan, you're like, I can score more than 7 points. We just put Robbie in there a handful of times, let him run the ball around in Jark West. You're like, we can get 7 points, if not more. So that's kind of something to be looking out for. Though Mississippi State, they, after Mike Leach passed, and obviously still, like, I'm still kind of sad about that because of how much he brought to the SEC. But they kind of promoted their defensive coordinator, Zach Arnett. He is now their head coach. He's only 36, which pretty impressive. So they're kind of trying out this. I mean, in my mind, I don't necessarily, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see him being the long-term head coach there. I feel like he's kind of like a temporary fill. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but just my gut. Jared, what's kind of your overall perception of where Mississippi State is? If what they've been doing this year, especially since switching from the air raid to a little bit more balance.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I hadn't watched a single game of theirs. Last week did not go well. I know Will Rogers wasn't playing, but I don't know that I don't know he's been having a good year either. I mean, they totally changed offensive philosophies. Definitely terrible about Mike Leach. I still can't believe that. And, overall, it's at home. I want to say we win, but I mean, AJ, I gotta see more consistent offense, honestly, to feel comfortable about any game left.
Yeah.
Um, there, so Ole Miss, we probably were relatively equally talented. We definitely will be, even in our deficiencies, we will be more talented than Mississippi State.
Yep. I agree.
Um, you would hope we have better coaching because they're more veteran. Every one of the coaches on our staff. Um, so it's at home. I don't expect it to be pretty, but at the end of the day, get a win. Just get a win.
Yeah.
Get that
You
monkey off your back.
you need to get an SEC win. I mean, we're 0-4 right
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
in the SEC, and that's just a bad stink. Like it just feels bad. And we're fans. I'm sure that feels even worse for the players and the coaches directly involved with this. You got to think this is one they're circling and say, guys, I know Ole Miss was rough last week, but you got to put your head down, grind for this Mississippi State game, because really, in actuality, Auburn has 4 pretty winnable games upcoming. I mean, we've got Mississippi State this week, at Vanderbilt the week after, at Arkansas, which again they only scored 3 points, then New Mexico State at home right before the Iron Bowl. Those are 4 very winnable games. If you can win all 4 of those, we're having a completely different conversation because you have 7 wins. You got a 7-5 season, and that's not even considering the Bama game. And you're swinging that momentum from, I'm kind of thinking of this season in like 3 parts right now, at least so far. Well, I guess say 2 parts so far. First, struggling at the beginning of the season, but we still are 3-0. So we get out. Middle of the season has been rough against Texas A&M, Georgia, LSU, and now Ole Miss. And in my mind, we're about to enter that third part of the season of pretty, it's we're finally favored, guys. We're finally favored in an SEC match. So that puts something in perspective. And this third part of the season can be where we kind of make our comeback swing. And I was hoping we would start that with Ole Miss because I think we still had the potential. Obviously, it didn't happen. So here we are. So let's talk about our players to watch, Jared, for this game. Who on offense are you going to be watching for Auburn?
You freeze.
Oh, I like that
Yeah.
one.
I mean, for real, I really am. I'm gonna
Yeah.
what's stop the QB rotation.
Mm,
I really don't care who we play. Like I know a lot of people are in Camp Robbie or Camp Thorne. I couldn't care less. I don't think there's a big difference from either one of them, passing or running. Just put one in and stick with them. I mean, I don't
mm-hmm.
care. Like you've brought it up before. I don't care if you bring Robbie in and in goal line. The crazy thing is, I think we're tops in the SEC or very close to red zone touchdowns. Like we score touchdowns when we get in the red zone. We just don't get there very often.
Yep.
So I don't think there's anything wrong with how we're doing that. But yeah, just stop the rotation. For
Yep.
Hugh, if you're listening, please stop the rotation.
Yeah.
Just pick one.
I have a friend who has his number, so I'll forward our
Yes.
podcast.
Yeah,
Maybe it
go.
gets along to Hugh Freeze,
I'm sure he hasn't heard this from anybody. This will be the first
Never.
time he hears it. Yeah.
Never.
And he's probably going to take my advice. So.
Obviously. Let's so for me, offense, Jarquez is my guy to watch. And the real reason for that is, I mean, I think Jarquez has been so quiet this year, minus a few plays. And I saw it was almost like an awakening moment.
He got his mojo back at Ole Miss.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if you caught this. This was against LSU towards the end of the game. Some camera got up on Jarquez, and he was like, the punter or the kicker net kind of thing, and he was just like banging his head against it. It was just so distraught. And I'm like, man, Jarquez is going through it. And he turned around the next weekend's Ole Miss, and he turned on the Jets. I mean, he had like, I think 140 yards combined total offense. I mean, he was making a huge impact. And
Well,
that's the kind of stuff you need in this Mississippi State game.
not only did he as a running back, but he dropped a much easier pass in the LSU game and was lack of focus, and he makes
Yep.
a very nice catch in the Ole Miss game that led to a touchdown. I know it was almost last to final drive, but like he didn't make that play in LSU, right? Or it may have been A&M or Georgia.
Yeah,
It was
one of
Georgia.
those.
It was
Yeah,
Georgia.
Georgia. Yeah.
It was the Georgia game. So he had been struggling, and he makes a much more difficult catch. And he just looked. I agree with you, man. He looked re-energized. He was running hard. Seemed angry, and
Mm-hmm.
we need that because I know a lot of people are mad we missed on Judkins. But at the end of the day, the running back room with us is pretty solid. The only thing that would have helped there is Ole Miss wouldn't have gotten him. But like Jarquez can control his body very well. It's hard to knock him down if you don't form tackle.
Yep.
That's the same with Judkins. So and Jarquez has kind of gotten back to that, at least in the Ole Miss game.
Yeah, for sure. On defense, Jared, who are you going to be watching for Auburn?
Maybe Falk. I feel like Falk. I don't have the stats. I feel like Falk actually probably played his best game against Ole Miss. I think he handled the run blocking or run defense a little better than he had.
Yeah.
I think he got some pressure. We got some pressure on Jackson Dart. Forced him to be a little more uncomfortable than we had been doing. So I think he's key, man. We got to have somebody that can get to the quarterback, and he's probably the ceiling for him is absolutely the highest ceiling on that defensive line.
Yeah.
And he's starting to get it. All right, he's been starter now for 2 games. It's another game at home. Can he start turning into a player that? And I don't even expect him to in year 1, but can he? Like, can he start becoming that player now? Which would be amazing.
Yeah. When I was just looking back, Keldrick Falk against Ole Miss, I think that was his best game because I haven't seen him this high up. He had 6 tackles, which is tied for third for Auburn. And I don't think I've seen him that high. He's usually kind of average like 1 to maybe tops 4 or maybe 5 tackles per game. And he was making some waves. I think what needs to start coming is more tackles for losses, sacks, which he was playing high school ball literally a year ago. So give him a little grace there, but it's showing that we're over halfway through the season. He's kind of learning the speed of the game, especially in the SEC. My player to watch on defense is going to be Keontae Scott. Something that is maybe a little overlooked, but Keontae Scott, he has been not only a great punt returner early on in the season, but secondarily a great just secondary player. He is playing like he's played so good. Then he got injured. He finally made his comeback this game against Ole Miss last week, and now I'm going to be watching him to see if he continues that because it almost looked like he didn't really miss a beat, which is pretty impressive coming off of just about any injury. And he's going to be instrumental because of how much I feel like our secondary sometimes is just lacking some depth there. Just having some backups. And Keontae's, he adds, he's a starter. He's going to be good. Special teams, Jared, who are you going to be watching?
Let's stick with your guy, but for special teams, I think I would, sometimes it takes a spark from, you need a spark to score. Maybe it's not going to come from offense. So maybe Keontae gets a good punt return. Maybe a run one back.
Yeah.
Now I know that I think they had him in on one of them. Then they had Coy Moore in on one. But I think if Keontae's healthy, he's our best option. So I'll keep an eye on him. because that's something that I think it's going to be a semi-ugly game. And maybe it takes a return from him to get us in short yardage for a touchdown or runs it all the way back. We need a spark from somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I did see both Coymore and Keontae kind of taking punt returns. I think both of them seem to be pretty good, solid uh, punt returners. We'll just see what they end up doing. I mean, Keontae was the clear starter at the beginning of the season, and you got to think, probably easing Keontae back into things, just saying, hey, focus on defense. We'll get you back integrated with the special teams play, and it'll just be, come with time to get him back into that. Special teams for me, I'm going to be watching. See, I've been going between our punter and our kicker. So hear me out. I have a feeling this game is going to be a little bit low scoring. Both teams have pretty good defenses. So, I mean, if it comes down to kind of the just flip the field, we need to just punt after punt back and forth. Obviously, Oscar Chapman. But potentially, if we get a long field goal chance, Alex McPherson. So I'm kind of splitting it a little bit, but that's just because I'm not sure how this game's going to necessarily play out, other than I do think it's probably going to be a low scoring game with both Auburn and Mississippi State having really, decent defenses. So we'll just have to wait and see what that kind of looks like. For our score predictions, let's go into this second to last segment here. And Auburn currently is favored by 6 points in this game, which is the first time that we've been favored in an SEC game this season. So again, kind of as fans, I'm hearing that stat and being like, what? We haven't been favored in any game in the SEC so far? And then you take a moment and you're like, yeah, those were some pretty tough teams. So again, it's okay. So, Jared, what's preseason? You had us at winning by 10. I had us winning by 14. Where are you kind of feeling now that we are at game week and only a few days away from this game?
I've lost all faith. I think we win because it's at home. I'm going to go by 1 point.
That's 1 point, love it.
I would go a half a point, but I don't think that's possible. Somebody has to win the game.
Are you gonna say the 3-2 score or something? Like against Mississippi State?
It would not surprise me if that's what happened. I'm not lying.
Man.
I hope we get proven wrong. I hope we go out there and we look like a competent offense. But in this current moment, it's just hard to pick us to win, honestly. But it's at home. They're not great either. So 1 point, AJ. Put it on the board.
I feel like your most conservative win prediction that you've ever had. So
I think it is. Listen, with us, Vegas has been pretty spot on actually.
Yeah.
They got it at 6. So, that's that just tells you it's going to be, there's no margin for error with us, right? If they somehow bust 2 big plays and if they get into the mid 20s, we're going to be in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially if it is low scoring. If we have some busted plays or something happens, man, that could be a rough one. For me, again, I'm kind of in the range that I'm thinking. It's going to be like a 24-14 kind of score. It's not going to get, if it gets into the 30s, that's going to be wild to me.
Yeah, I think.
But I don't think
if anybody gets to 30, we're done. Yeah. So
I'm going to predict us winning about 10 points, somewhere in that range of like 24-14 kind of win.
So you're just adding a 0 to my prediction then. You're going.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
pretty much.
1 to 10. Okay.
Yeah. Let's go on to our final segment of the day, an Auburn fan perspective of the SEC. There were only 5 games. Auburn was one of them. But we had Mississippi State play. They only scored 7 points, like we've already mentioned, and Arkansas only scored 3. My dad said he watched a little bit of the game, and he was like, this is so hard to watch. I was busy for most of the day, or at least during this game, and I was like, thank goodness I didn't sit down and watch that game because that's just brutal. Like, how do you do that, dude? Like, so
Well,
bad.
apparently it was so hard for Sam Pittman to watch because he fired his offensive coordinator.
There's that, I mean, considering, and I just looked at this, total for both Mississippi State and Arkansas's offense, only 405 yards between both teams. That's just both teams. That's not just one team. That's both teams. So that kind of shows you the offensive issues going on with that. We also had Bama and Tennessee. So at half, I was like, oh, wow, it's tied up. All right, here we go. You might maybe Tennessee does something. And then second half, it was like 3 plays in or something in the second half, and Alabama does what Alabama does, scores a touchdown. And from that point on, it was Bama. All Bama. It was, I think, 27 points of unanswered points. Bama just took over, and there was nothing else that Tennessee could do to slow them down. We also had Missouri. They were facing South Carolina. South Carolina's, I kind of put them in the realm of Auburn, kind of they're just struggling right now. It feels like they're just trying to figure out what they're doing. And Missouri, they're top 20 team right now, and they only have one loss. They're kind of making waves now. Yeah, they're still Missouri. I don't think they're even if they went out. I mean, maybe if they went out, you're talking about something crazy. But they're about to face Georgia, and we all know how that game's about to go. So, and then the final game, LSU versus Army, and just as you expect, LSU put up 62, and Army zip nada. Which props to LSU. Not many teams can say that they've shut out a team in the modern era of football, because that just doesn't happen much, especially a Division I team playing another Division I team. So, Jared, any other kind of observations, anything else that you see going on before we get out of here?
No, man. I think you pretty much covered it. I think that Arkansas-Miss State game might be a similar feel this upcoming Saturday. But if we come out on top, just get a win, get that good feeling back, build from that. The next 4 games are definitely winnable, but we gotta have some better decision making going on.
Yeah, for sure. I was just with a couple of people that are Mississippi State fans. Both of them were actually collegiate athletes at Mississippi State. One was a football player, one played soccer for them. And I was just asking them, I was like, trying to get my intel. Hey, what do I need to know? And they were like, pretty much they avoided it and said I declined to comment because I think they were just embarrassed. Like, he was just like, what is happening with Mississippi State? Like, that was kind of the sentiment. And I mean, again, we have a shot, and we better seize that against Mississippi State this week. If we want any semblance of a chance at getting, in my mind, probably a winning season and going to a bowl. So,
agreed.
You got to get through this one.
You got to get through this one.
Alrighty, Jared. Before we get out of here, how can the people stay in touch with you?
You can find me on Facebook under my name, Jared Davis.
And you can find me on Twitter at AJAY_. It's always great to be an Auburn Tiger, and War Eagle.
War Eagle.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on the E2C Network. On your way out, I want to remind you to stop by e2cnetwork.com. It's your one-stop shop for all our content across our podcast, YouTube channel, and much more. To stay up to date with us, make sure you're following social media accounts such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. While our content here may always be Auburn sports heavy, if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. War Eagle.